All right, guys, today we're going to go over the real life haunting that inspired the Poltergeist. So, back in 1958, near Amityville in New York, a man and his family lived in a small house, and when he was gone to work, basically his wife and two teenagers heard some popping noises in the kitchen area. They went to inspect and they found some bottles of wine and some holy water had been opened on their own. They called their husband immediately. The dad came home and basically checked everything out and verified that this actually happened. So the father's name was James Herman, and he was a real skeptic on all of this activity. He basically told his family, just keep quiet, relax, it'll go away. But 5 days later, it actually happened again. The bottles started popping off, and apparently the next day it happened again. So these bottles are opening on their own when nobody's there, and they can't explain why. And basically, the father kind of thought maybe the teenagers, the kids were playing pranks or something. There's some logical explanation for this. And so the father was in the bathroom one day, and all of a sudden he, in the mirror, noticed bottle moving or some kind of object moving across the counter in the bathroom. So he became terrified as well, and he ended up calling 911. So the police had arrived to investigate the situation, and when they got there, upon investigating, they actually heard the bottles pop as well, and they went and found some that had opened up on their own. So this led to several different investigations happening. They did all kinds of investigations looking for radio transmissions and things like that. When that didn't work, basically they ended up bringing in a priest in February of that year. So these investigations ended up gaining a lot of attention. They even landed in a magazine called Popular Life magazine, and they labeled this story House of Flying Objects. So it was getting to be well known. There were several people getting involved with this. Even the director of the parapsychology laboratory at Duke University. He had a theory that basically the teenagers' puberty and hormones and energy was somehow causing these disturbances. Basically, the investigators came and they questioned the kids, and during this time, there was no more activity. So overall, there were 70 reported events that happened between March and February of 1958. And now 24 years later is when the first movie was written about this event, called The Poltergeist. In case you don't know, this was a very popular movie from the 1980s. When I was a young kid, I remember watching this movie and just being really scared. I mean, I was probably 5, 6 years old when I saw it, and very, very scary movie for a young kid. I thought it was a good movie as well. The question is, why does the movie and the cast seem to be cursed? As far as the cast being cursed, we'll cover that here right now. So very sad to say that the main character of the movie, a very cute little 6-year-old blonde girl named Heather O'Rourke, actually had apparently developed Crohn's disease and then had the flu, and somehow or another this led to a cardiac arrest. Very, very different story. I'm not sure how to comment on it, but very sad nonetheless. Very untimely death at only 11 years old, which was 5 years after the filming of this movie. And during this movie, she was only 6 years old. So Dominique Dune was also one of the main characters on The Poltergeist. And basically in 1982, her boyfriend and her got in some kind of an argument and they broke up. So she was at her home and her boyfriend came to her home to try to talk her into getting back together. When she refused, he killed her in her driveway. He only received 6.5 years prison time, and he only ended up serving 3 years and 7 months. Why did he receive such a light prison sentence for murder? There was also a preacher from Poltergeist 2 that had passed away from stomach cancer, and then a naive character that played a naive tailor or American shaman, he passed away from lung cancer as well. So there were a couple more fatalities, but this was for the second volume of Poltergeist. One of the theories that was used regarding the Poltergeist movie was that it was cursed because the skeletons used in the movie that popped up out of the water next to one of the main characters were actually real skeletons. So they got or acquired some real skeletons, and they thought it would be much more realistic, and they actually used real skeletons, and the actor apparently didn't know they were real until after the scene was filmed, if you can imagine that. So here are a couple other real-life documented haunting stories. This first one is in 1970s Thornton, England. A family was tormented by a poltergeist. So basically it started out in the middle of the night. The radio turned on all by itself. You know, they didn't think that much of it. And then all of a sudden the lampshade started to get knocked over by invisible hands. So I mean, this is kind of how it started basically. And they started paying attention to these type of things. During the Christmas season in 1972, a Christmas ornament was hanging on the tree and apparently launched off the tree, hit the husband in the forehead, and sent him back into his chair. As he was sitting there in the chair, the Christmas tree apparently started to shake violently. So the family was getting pretty shaken up by all of these different activities. Right around that same time, a door flung open and all the lights in the house turned on. So I think this was somewhat of the final straw for the family. So the family went ahead and contacted a priest, and they were having the house blessed, and during this blessing, objects were actually flying all around the house. Basically, it was just kind of chaos, so they moved on to consulting a medium. The medium said that basically there was a farmer that looked at the family as trespassers. So the farmer was causing all these kinds of chaotic problems to get the trespassers to leave. Basically, he had even had his wife, his ghost wife, aiding in the poltergeist action. So they were haunting this family. Apparently the ghost wife was chasing the actual wife that lived in the house up the stairs at night, I guess. It had just progressed into getting worse and worse and worse. So the family decided they had better move. Apparently after they had left the residence, most of the activity had stopped. The new residents in the home hadn't reported any new activity that we know of. So in Edinburgh, Scotland, at a place called Greyfriars Cemetery, there was a mausoleum, and basically his name was Bloody Mackenzie. Apparently he was quite the bad guy, and a homeless man had gone into the shelter and something scared him out of there, and he ran out of there covered in dust, and a man walking his dog apparently saw this and was terrified. So after this event, apparently all kinds of haunting activities have been happening in this area. So they had got a tour situation going, and a bunch of tourists were coming there, and they had guided tours. There was 170 different reports of serious injuries and people passing out. There were 350 reports of some type of attack or injury, including broken bones. They had to close the site to visitors because of all these injuries that had occurred. Have you guys ever heard of the Ghostbusters ruling? It's actually based on a famous court case from 1991. There were two parties involved named Strambovsky and Ackley. So Strambovsky bought the house from Ackley, and he took her to court because she had claimed the house was haunted. And not only did she claim the house was haunted, but she actually reported it to both Reader's Digest and the local newspaper. So she claimed that over the 10 years she lived there that they were having all kinds of different poltergeist activity. She's telling the local newspaper, she's telling the national magazines. So this house has a reputation both locally and nationally as a haunted house. The court had to review this case and basically ponder the facts. Would an inspection have told the new buyer that the home was labeled as a haunted home? No, it wouldn't have. Would this potentially affect the value of the home? Yes, it could. If it's labeled as a haunted home, it could potentially reduce the likelihood or potential sales for the future, thereby reducing the home's value. So, long story short, Strombowski, the new home buyer, did end up winning the case. The court ruled that the seller had a legal duty to inform the buyer of the haunted house status. And now, because the buyer was from out of town, he wouldn't be likely to know that this was labeled as a haunted house. So, because of this, the seller took advantage of the buyer's negligence or incompetence, having not been from the area. So the court allowed the new homeowner to rescind his contract, so he was able to back out of the purchase of the haunted house. And now this case illustrates that the seller cannot create a reputational condition for the home. And if they did, they would have to inform the buyer. And this reputational condition would likely negatively affect the value of the home. And now during this court case, the judges and the people involved used different terms and phrases about ghosts, including Hamlet and Ghostbusters, and they used supernatural phrases such as the plaintiff hasn't got a ghost of a chance. Thank you for following along and listening to the story, everybody. I hope you come along for the next one. Please like and subscribe.